Welcome guys! Being able to spot people in PUBG is perhaps the most important skill of all, but being able to avoid detection is likewise extremely important, as making yourself harder to spot will increase the chances of you spotting your enemies before they spot you. This is my best tips as to how you can stay below the radar and avoid detection. Now the three most important aspects of avoiding visual detections are limiting your open angles, avoid being victim to contrast, and know the least detectable movement. Limiting your angles. Limiting your angles is by far the most important skill in order to avoid detection. The theory is simply that the less directions an enemy can possibly see you from, the less likely you are to be spotted. When playing in PLAYERUNKNOWN's Battlegrounds, you should always, and I really mean always, try to limit your vulnerable angles. A good example of this is using the terrain to its fullest. Consider every small variation of the terrain an opportunity for cover. There are many places around the map where you can stay completely hidden while completely out in the open without any large objects like trees or rocks in your nearest vicinity. In order to get really good at this, you need to learn how to properly risk assess your surroundings. An example of risk assessment is this. I know there's a guy to the south because I've heard a suppressed weapon being fired from that direction. I also know that the very same guy is going to push in soon, as he's going to be pushed by the circle. Additionally, I have heard shots fired in a western to northwestern direction, which means I know for sure that there are people there. Because I've got this information, I know to limit my angles in the direction that the enemies are. The best way to avoid visible detection will be to use this tree to deny people from the west to northwest from getting a visual on me. At the same time, I can wait for the guy in the south because I know the guy will push in any second. Always risk assess your angles and move accordingly. You may not know for sure which direction an enemy is coming from, but basing your decisions on an intelligent evaluation of risk is far better than just guessing. Another quick reminder here would be to use crouch mode as often as possible, and sometimes it even pays to move forward in prone position. Avoid being victim to contrast. The main thing people are looking for when trying to spot an enemy is contrast. This is why you should always try to avoid being victim to it. Perhaps you've played games before where staying in the shadows will make you stay completely hidden from brainless computer-controlled enemies. And although PUBG isn't quite like that, being inside shadows, especially on sunny maps, will significantly reduce the contrast you're exposing yourself to, and thereby limit chances that your enemies will spot you. So whenever possible, stay inside the shadows. Another thing I want to address is hiding behind rocks. Rocks are often highly illuminated and bright, making it perfect background for creating contrast. And on top of that, people know to focus on rocks and they know they shouldn't see any contrast on them whatsoever, because if they do, they've seen an enemy. My advice here is to avoid staying near bright rocks, but instead prioritize trees having the shadowy side as background. A final thing about contrast is clothing. Yes, the black coats are cool, but they really don't do anything good for you. In fact, they only make you easier to spot, as you're not only making your body look bigger, but you're also creating an even larger contrast to often highly illuminated areas of the map. Use normal clothing with moderately bright natural colors. The least detectable movement. The main thing people are spotting for is contrast. But the second most important thing people will be looking for is movement. Now you can't really avoid having to move, and you can always end up in a situation where you have to move with no nearby cover. Your best chances of avoiding detection when moving is to limit the horizontal motion your enemies will see. The human eye can much more easily detect movement when done in a horizontal direction rather than vertical. This means that a guy running directly towards you will be harder to spot than someone moving horizontally. So the next time you're peeking over a hill trying to spot an enemy you just heard, move directly towards the sound rather than moving sideways, as this is a horizontal motion which is easier to detect. Naturally, the risk is that you might be harder to spot but easier to hit, so use this information at your own discretion. So in conclusion, the best way to avoid being spotted by enemies is to limit your open angles using the terrain to its full potential. Stay in the shadows and low illuminated areas, and if possible, always lower your horizontal movement in relation to the high-risk areas around you. Now that's all I had for you guys in this video. I hope you found this guide useful, and if you want to see more like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.